Two. Shalom, and welcome to another edition of Parasha Talk. I'm Rabbi Elliot Malamet in Highland Park, New Jersey, at the Highland Park Conservative Temple Congregation Anshe Emet. Joining me, my good friends, Rabbi Jeremy Kalmanofsky, Anshe Chesed, New York City, Rabbi Barry Chesler, Solomon Schechter Day School of Long Island. We're recording this in the week before Thanksgiving, and of course, we're recording this also before the deliberations, or as the deliberations are taking place in the government of Israel on the release of hostages, hostage negotiations. So our hearts are with our brothers and sisters in Israel. We're praying for the release of hostages. We're praying for an end to the misery that these families are going through. We know that this, so far, this hostage deal only includes a portion of them, the mothers and the children, as cruel as that might be, but hoping that at least some of them will be free soon. I think we're always dedicating our study to them, and we're dedicating our study to people who are experiencing in a much closer orbit everything that's going on. We are in solidarity with Israel in a way that is quite deep, and we talked about that in our previous time. Just a second. And speaking of Israel, a lot of the Parsha deals with the land of Israel, at least leaving the land. But Jeremy,
I want, before we go on.
Yes, go ahead.
The hostages. I picked this up.
Oh my God!
Bring them home now.
Akshav.
I picked this
Absolutely.
up. I picked this up at the Families Forum in Tel Aviv, the place by the Tel Aviv Museum where they have the empty Shabbat table, and they have all these hundreds of empty chairs, and there's a tent where the parents of hostages go, and they have pictures of their kids, and they talk about their kids. So they had these T-shirts, and bought them for all the members of my family.
That's amazing. So we are with Yaakov in Parashat Vayetzei. He is at the beginning of this parsha. We know he's running away from his family. He's running away from his brother, but he's running obviously also at the instruction of his parents to find a wife. He's got nothing. I always like to point out the fact that he's got nothing. He has this dream. We're not going to talk about the dream, the ladder, everything, the promise, his consecration or his anointing of the rock, right? Okay, all of that. These are such rich stories. We're gonna catch him right when he meets Rachel. Okay, it's the beginning of the second Aliyah, chapter 29, verse 1. Yaakov raglav vayelech artzav v'negedim. So he picks up, or his feet pick him up, and he lands in the east, Vayar, and all of a sudden he sees Vinay. Behold, a be'er basadeh, a well in the field. V'hinei sham shlosha edrei. There are 3 flocks of sheep that are hovering about it, because that's the well that everybody draws water from. And it goes on. Everybody gets there. The narrator tells us that that's the place where they all come together. And then when they all come together, they remove the stone that's covering the well, and then they dole out the water, or they allow everyone to take their turns to draw water. They shiva to Evan. They put the rock back on the opening of the well, and then Yaakov sees these shepherds. I think the story is very rich. I want to jump to where he sees Rachel. Rachel comes, and V'hinei Rachel bito ba imatzon. They talk about Rachel. Rachel's coming with her sheep, and then they're talking, and he sees her, Rachel ba imatzon. You can't resist the onomatopoeia there. Right? Rachel ba imatzon vayihi. Verse 10, Kasher ra'a et Yaakov et Rachel. When he sees her, when Jacob sees Rachel, the daughter of Lavan, this brother of his mother, and the sheep of Lavan, the brother of his mother, Vayigash Yaakov, he goes up to the well, Vayagel et Evan, he pulls off the rock that's on the mouth of the well, Vayashk et Tzon Lavan achi imo, and he goes into action, and he's doling out the water for the sheep of his uncle Lavan.
Right. So this is the Bible's way of telling us that at heart, Yaakov is a businessman
Okay, why?
because everything is about the sheep. He sees Rachel, which means sheep, of course,
Yeah.
and he immediately converts that into the flocks that he's going to water in the sense so he can acquire them.
Well, he also is very emotional. Let's go to the very next verse.
Well, that's good. That's good. I do want to go to the next verse. That is good. I hadn't really thought of it that way. I do think that at least one part of it, just to first of all, to emphasize the thing that Barry said that many of our listeners won't know, that the word Rachel is a female sheep.
Okay.
So that is a very good observation in interpreting the story. But the second thing is just to make sure everybody knows at Haran, there's something weird, which is that at midday, which is middle of the day, you're not bringing the animals home from pasture for the evening. They're all sitting around the well waiting for the watering. And he says, what are you guys doing? He says, well, the stone is so big that it takes all of us to roll it off. And so we got to assemble all the whole bunch of shepherds to roll it off, and then we'll water it, and then we'll roll it back, because this is a team effort. And so Yaakov, he sees her, and he is filled with enthusiasm and power. He can leap tall buildings in a single bound. He does it all by himself, which I think is a pretty passionate. I go for the emotional content in a story like this. He's pretty passionate, and just seeing her opens it up. And then we get verse 10, was just, I want to point out, is Vayashk et hatzon. He waters the tzon, he waters the sheep. And what's the next word?
Vayshak.
Vayshak, same letters. He kisses her.
All right. So I want to take just a different approach to this and say this is a very strange procedure at a well. And look, they're all waiting. They're all these flocks and shepherds are waiting. They know who's who, and they know that she's coming. Okay. And it seems to me that he's walking in on a situation that has certain rules to it. And the reason why that there are rules here is because you have it hovering in the background a lot of cheating, right? You have one resource, the well. The well has to be sufficient for everyone. And what can happen is if the well belongs to everyone, there could be one greedy flock that will take all the water. And depending on how the water and the well renews itself. So they have to come to an agreement, and the well has to be corked, right, in order so that they can distribute the water equitably. Yaakov, not only is he coming in and he's moved with great strength when he sees her, to kind of show off and be muscular, but he also breaks the rules here. He breaks the convention, and this does not endear him to the people around him. And yet he's trying to kind of gain the attention of this very beautiful woman, and he's also trying to change the order here. I think
this is really good because, first of all, it calls to mind that Hebrew saying, rabbinic saying, "Ahava mekalkelet et hashura." Love breaks the rules.
Nice.
And I do think that Yaakov is breaking the rules, but also the rules are going to get broken on him. So there's a lot of complicated, the text runs at cross purposes of rule breaking and rule following. So there's a lot going on.
Good,
but
very good. Okay, so now let's talk about the emotion, because he kisses her, which is also unusual. I think quite forward for an unknown man to kiss a woman in the middle of the Levant, okay, at this time. But he's discovered that she's his cousin. Okay. Vayisat kolo, he raises his voice, vayif, he cries. So let me ask you this question, which is, what's the trigger here for the cathartic emotion? I mean, this is a moment that is quite emotional. It's a burst. The dam bursts here. What do you think's going on, Barry?
Well, I'm gonna go with the love at first sight quality of this story, because Jacob is portrayed as completely loving her, and as we'll see in a moment, he works for 7 years, and it just seemed like a few days because he loved her.
Sure. Okay. So
I'm gonna go
because he was busy cheating his father-in-law.
Yeah. but the classical readings are, kind of more complicated. Like Rashi, for example, quoting the Midrash notes, I mean, as we happen to know this, that Rachel is going to die on the road to Ephrati Beit Lechem in childbirth, and she's not going to be buried in the cave of Machpelah with Abraham and Sarah, Isaac and Rebekah, Jacob and Leah. So Rashi's reading, and based on that Midrash, is that there's something tragic looming in the distance, and I think that that's also a good reading. He cries. He might have this great love, and it's maybe not tears of joy. Maybe it's tears of foreboding.
So he's crying for the destruction of the temples. That's what it says also.
But that also comes up with Binyamin and Yosef.
Yeah, no, he's crying, because he's given this gift of prophecy in which he sees destruction. I mean, we read that with a kind of wink, but there's also a beautiful piece of wisdom there, which is, contained in this moment is destiny, and destiny has tragedy to it. I mean, we don't need to go too much to our present moment, but I've been watching closely and watching stories, and people who will get married right now, and there have been so many stories about these young men going off to war. Sometimes they're young women, and they decide that they have to get married right away, and looming in the context of their marriage is this catastrophe. And in one case that was reported on the news, it was they had just got up from Shiva. They had just got up, they planned the wedding, and their parents were killed in the massacre, and they just got up from Shiva, and they decided that they have to get married right away. And so the wedding took place on day 8. And of course, in an emergency, you can certainly do this, and you can suspend all the laws and all the rules of Avelut for the sake of marriage, and in this Sha'at HaDechak moment, which of course Israel is in. And how do you even begin to parse out the emotions? And that's when I read that he cries, I'm thinking like it's just not one. It's not only one thing.
I want to stay with this image though of crying for the temple, because what we have here then is a period of time before the temple when people are crying over it, and a period of time after its destruction when people are crying over it, which only emphasizes, to me at least, the catastrophic loss of the temple, that without it, we are always crying, whether we come before or after.
Yeah.
Nice.
And so that it would be projected in the rabbinic imagination all the way back to Jacob, that he's mindful of the unfolding cycles of Jewish history. I mean, that seems
stunning.
That is really quite rich. I mean, yes, we do kind of, at least I do kind of, wink at filtering everything through the Churban of the temple, but it is because it's projected back to the ancestor. It is like saying, okay, our conception of the cycles of Jewish history are going to be loss and exile, and Jacob is right here, in a space of loss and exile, having been, Vayetzei Yaakov mi Beersheva vayelech Harana. He has to leave the land of Israel and goes, and there's a Zohar. Harana in Aramaic means the other place or the other person, like the Sitra Achra, the other side. So the Zohar on this Parsha, it's a meditation on evil in the world. Jacob leaves the place of order and goes into the other place.
What about
So Jacob also is the paradigmatic patriarch in the sense that he's exiled twice.
Yeah.
He's exiled to the northeast and to the southwest, which also prefigures so much of Jewish history.
What about the idea that he's got nothing? There's a midrash that says he's crying because he's measuring himself up against Abraham and the servant. The servant comes. I love the contrast. The servant comes with camels, with gold and silver, with rings, nose rings, and jewelry, and armbands and wristbands and clothing, etc., and bags and bags and bags of cash. And he's got nothing. He's got 2 nickels. He's got nothing. And so the midrash says that he's crying because he has nothing. And how is he going to win the favor of this woman?
That is an awesome addition to the conversation, because It's exactly, we know husbands always find wives at wells. That's how the Bible stories go.
Okay, fine.
And so this story is that this midrash that you cite is just such a perfect thing, because we know we're supposed to read this one in conversation with the one we just read a few chapters ago.
Exactly.
It's just perfect. It's just perfect.
And so there's poverty there, but we'll see this at the beginning of next week's parsha. He understands something. Look, we have some criticism of Yaakov, certainly. Barry, you said that he's always looking for the deal, and of course, part of the emotion here is that he understands that he's really at the bottom. He's got nothing, and how is he? This is like Muttle the tailor and Fiddler on the Roof. How am I going? I'm going to marry him off to a tailor. He's got nothing, right? But he works his way up, and he gets that Singer sewing machine.
It occurs to me it's more like What Makes Sammy Run, the Abe Kahn novel. That Jacob often comes off as a man on the make, and he achieves much, but he pays a tremendous price for it, and other people pay the price for it too.
Yeah.
He's not part of his tragedy, I think, is that he brings pain and suffering to the ones that he loves, not just himself.
So let's take the next frame, which is he tells her, Vayaged Yaakov LaRachel, he tells Rachel that Achi Aviha hu, that he is the brother of her father, not exactly, but the daughter, he's the son of his father's sister. V'chiven Rivkahu, that here it is, he is the son of Rivka. Vatarotz vataged lavia. She runs home and she tells
now
him.
The question is, what does she tell her father?
Yes, exactly. Okay. So
that's so fascinating, because the Torah just says, all right, so she relayed a
yeah,
message.
but his father, they have the memory of wealth. Okay. Lavan has the memory of wealth, and she's running home, and she must know something about this, right? Something about the way Aunt Rebecca was taken over.
But there's something else there too, because when Rivka left, it was with the understanding that she wasn't coming back, and now the son shows up.
Right, but there's wealth there. They must be like on the mantle, something that reminds them of Rebecca, or maybe they were able to buy a bigger tent because they were loaded afterwards. There was a tremendous transaction that happened when the servant took Rebecca with them, and maybe Lavan, who is interested only in wealth, is interested in finding his relative Jacob for the sake of acquiring wealth from him. Okay, Vayarotz likrato. This is verse 13. So he hears this and he runs to greet him. Vayechabek lo. I love the fact there's a midrash that says he's patting him down.
Yeah.
He pats him down. He's looking for money in his pockets. Vayinashek lo, kisses him. Vayavi'eu el beito, and he brings him into those. Vayisaper leLavan et kol advarim ha'ela, and Jacob tells Lavan everything, and what's so fascinating here is I'm so rooted in the previous story where the servant is such a magnificent storyteller, and Jacob is not. Jacob is nothing. There's nothing.
Well, so I think you have to cut Jacob a little bit of slack, because the narrator is
not giving him any space.
Because what does it mean that Jacob narrates all these things? Does he say, Uncle Lavan, I'm here because I cheated my brother twice and he wants to kill me? Maybe I can find refuge with you. I'm looking for love in the right place because my father tells me Canaan is the wrong place.
Okay. Well, look how Lavan responds to him. He says, Ach atzmi uvisari ata, which of course is filled with the irony that and literary, richness, right? You are my bone and you are my flesh. Atzmi uvisari ata. We're the same person. We're the same guy, right?
And that's why a man leaves his mother and father and cleaves to his uncle.
So just to explain that, that's what Adam says at the creation of Chava. You are bone of my bone and flesh of my flesh. Lavan says it here, and it is, but I think it is right on to say Lavan, Yaakov, peas in a pod. They got some of the same. They got some of the same sneakiness being on the make. Sammy Glick.
Do you think that he's already sized him up here?
Who?
Lavan,
Who?
Yaakov
do you
or
think
Lavan?
Lavan has sized up Yaakov here?
Yeah, because the story works because there is going to be a little karmic payback to Jacob. The story works only if Lavan really does know who he's dealing with.
Yeah.
Well, Yaakov comes off as something of a rube. He thinks he's sophisticated, but Lavan is more than his match. And in fact, the only thing that really bails Yaakov out at the end is that God intervenes so that Lavan doesn't
Well,
do serious damage.
Yaakov's cleverness in the end is going to be, first of all, I want to call attention to a certain Bible scholar that I know, to whom I'm related by marriage. In her book, Dangerous Sisters of the Hebrew Bible, Amy points out that the sisters of Rachel and Leah, even though they're competitors, they throw their weight at the end of the whole story when Jacob says, "We got to get out of here. We got to go back to Canaan because your father's cheated me 10 times." They go, "We're with you," and they throw their weight with the husband and they undermine their own paterfamilias for the sake of their husband. So, but along with that is Jacob's tremendous cleverness, because he pulls off this crazy little magical animal husbandry thing where
which no one understands.
He manipulates
manipulates the color of the flocks, which whatever. There's some sort of thing which does you can't actually change the color of the sheep by feeding them chestnuts, but he pulls it off with enormous sophistication and cleverness. And so it's like Ocean's 11 is what Yaakov pulls off some stunt and so undermines and bamboozles Lavan. But I do think that the sneakiness of each party in the course of this is like comic and almost fun, because when Lavan, right, like, so he's patting him down and he knows that the previous guy came with all that stuff that you said, all the camels and the retinue of other servants and the gold and the silver and all the stuff. And Jacob, as we said, he crosses the Jordan with nothing but a stick. He's got Zippo. So Lavan comes along and says, okay, well, this verse 15, okay, just because you're my kinsman, you shouldn't work for free. How shall I pay you? You just know that the guy who's saying, let's work out something fair, is going to be massively unfair.
All right, so then we'll move to the clincher verse. Ula Lavan shtevanot. He's got two daughters, Lavan. Shema Gdola Leah. The eldest is Leah. The younger is Rachel. And then verse 17, Vene Leah rakot. The eyes of Leah are what?
Soft or weak.
Weak, soft. V'Rachel hayta yefat to'ar v'yefat mareh. And she is of beautiful to look at and a beautiful form. Yefat
Right.
to'ar,
So what I would
look
suggest is that the way to understand it is that when the two women appear together, everyone is looking, even staring at Rachel because of her beauty, and no one is paying much attention to Leah. So it's not a description of Leah's physical appearance, but the way other people look at her physical appearance.
I think to support this, but I would make it a little bit tighter syntactically. Ayin can mean the organ of sight, but it can also mean the appearance. So, for example, mana is ke'ein habedolach. It looks like whatever bedolach is. Modern Hebrew, it's crystal, but whatever it is in Bible times. And ke'ein hatechelet, ein hatechelet means the blue color. So then I would say eine Leah rakot might be construed as Leah's appearance was weak, while Rachel's not that her einayim, not that her
Right.
optical nerves are bad, but that her appearance is weak and compared with the smoking hot sister.
Well, wait a second. Well, why wouldn't we go for the reading that this is a euphemism and this is simply biblical parallelism, antithetical parallelism, where the first part of the verse is opposite the second part, or more broadly, the second part is opposes the first part, and vene Leah rakot simply is a euphemism for she wasn't much to look at. Possible.
No, I agree with that.
But do we ever have that in the Bible? Can you think of another ugly person in the Bible? I mean,
well, Eov in chapter 3.
Yeah.
After he gets his boils.
Esav is I think that the claim that Esav comes out of the womb all hairy and red is a mocking physical description.
Right.
Well, also I think when Ishmael is described as a wild man, that also is I think a negative thing.
Well, we do have, the character traits of the physical character traits of the matriarchs, Sarah, Rebecca, and now Rachel, all of which who are described in various degrees of beauty. And we'll note, of course, that Yosef later on, he will be referred to in the masculine of that Yefeh Toar, V'Yefeh Mara. Possibly, he's not the only character that is referred to that.
But isn't David described so?
David is Tov Ro'i. He is
nice to look at.
Yeah, he's gorgeous. And Eliyahu Hanavi, oddly enough, there's a scene in which somebody comes to Elisha, Eliyahu's student, I think it's Elisha, and says that this crazy thing, this guy appeared, and he goes, "Oh, what was he a really hairy guy wearing a hairy coat?" And they go, "Yes." Oh, that was Eliyahu. Eliyahu was like the one character who you get a description like that whatever. He's just Grizzly Adams.
All right, so let's move on to the next verse, which is Vayehav Yaakov et Rachel. He loves Rachel, and he says, "Evodcha sheva shanim." I'll work for 7 years, berachel bitcha ktana, for your youngest daughter. And then Lavan says this lovely line: Tov titi ota lach, mititi ota leish acher shva imadi. Okay,
who cares?
Better I should give her to you than another man. And so stay with me. And so the thing is, we've already seen examples of the other men in this story. They've been at the well. Okay, these are not specimens of human maleness, or they're not people that you would be wanting to give your daughter to. Okay, the fact that she is unmarried at this point only suggests that up until now there have been no suitable suitors for her, and there are a lot of factors here that are in confluence here. The fact that we have a relative, the fact that we have this person who's willing to work, and he seems to be the best out of at least the lot that is.
But again, there's a pragmatic element here that goes beyond the relationship between Yaakov and Rachel, because I think this is the Torah letting us know that Lavan knows a lot more of the backstory than we think he does, because Yaakov actually has to stay with him. He's in no position to go back home because, it's a fate that is death, as far as he knows. So this is Lavan telling him, "Sure, you could stay here. I've got good use for you."
Well,
and he kind of takes advantage of him, even with this first deal. Because what kind of a bargain is that, to work 7 years for a woman?
Well,
seriously, I mean,
it's a long time. It's got to wait.
It's a long time. But I would say two things about this. First of all, I will work for 7 years. Berachel bitcha ktana, the way it is classically read, and even today, modern Hebrew, berachel bitcha ktana is like an idiom for, I want to spell this whole thing out. So the midrashic way of reading it is, I want to work for Rachel. And by the way, it's not some Rachel from the Shuk. It's Bitcha. It's your daughter. And by the way, it's not either of your daughters. It's the younger one, because he knows that Lavan is going to manipulate. So he wants to put a fine print out. And then Lavan says something obnoxious. All right, well, it's as good as this one as another. And it's kind of this like, who cares? I'll give her to you. Or contrast that to what Lavan and Bethuel said when the servant does with Rivka. They say, Me Adonai yatsa hadavar. God's got a plan here, which maybe even in that scene back in chapter 24 is a little grumbly, like, what are you even pretending to ask us? This is out of our hands. But here, I just think that he could have said, listen, God has brought us together once again, and I'm glad for our families to be. He says, well, whatever, I'll give her to you. So what? And I just think the Lavan comes off as being kind of indifferent.
Okay, so then the 7 years go by, and we have this beautiful romantic poetic line, Vayhi benav ki yamim achadim, and these 7 years were to him like 7 days in his love for her. And then Vayomer Yaakov Lavan, it's not poetic here. Hava et ishti, give me my woman. Kimalu yamai vavo eleha. So because the days have been fulfilled, and I will be able to consummate with her. Vayasof Lavan et kol anshe hamakom. Why do you think that, let me translate that, he gathers everybody up and he makes the drink fest. He makes a big party. So what do you think he's doing here? Why is he knows what he's doing. He knows he's going to cheat his future son-in-law out of the promised woman. Why is he doing it in public? Or does he have a choice? Or is this just the custom of what you do at a wedding? Or
Hadn't thought about this question before, but it adds to the dramatic and comic effect. He's got this big, gigantic feast, and he's going to embarrass the hell out of Jacob. Because now Jacob's now, if they had a little silent wedding, and Jacob got tricked in the way that he's tricked, he could have said, like, no deal. But now everybody in town knows about it. And so he's going to show his face back again, and he's got a big cream pie in the face.
So I just want to piggyback on that and say, Lavan, he's not a man known for his honor. Okay, his father, I think, Bethuel, was an honorable man. Everybody has Lavan's number. Okay, and it's not that everybody's in on the con here. But they know that they have to be present at the party because it's his daughter is getting married. So he feels he's got an obligation to make a public statement. And I don't think he really cares about his reputation in front of people. And he grounds his behavior in a kind of quote unquote norm, right? The norm is, look, we don't do that here. How could you expect?
So I think, though, that we might not entirely downgrade Lavan, because he's in competition with this young upstart who's coming in with his newfangled idea, right? We really haven't heard of people marrying for love before, and saying that I'm the new kid in town. And Lavan is going to make sure that Yaakov knows he may be the new kid in town, but this is my town, not yours.
Yeah.
And we're going to do things my way. And, it may take you a little while to learn this, but don't worry, you'll get the message.
It's Gordie Howe to Bobby Orr with the elbow. Welcome to the NHL. All right, we have to wrap it up, but the great moment of the story is that he goes to sleep, and lo and behold, he wakes up.
And that's why the party also is important, because if Jacob is not in full possession of his faculties, shall we say, it's easier for this ruse to work.
Very nice. Well, we barely touched the surface here. Of course, he wakes up and he discovers that it's Leah, and he gets very upset. And then the story unfolds from there, where he'll marry Rachel. And the Parsha will continue and tell us about.
Right. So there's one other thing we have to mention.
Yeah. Go ahead.
I got one thing too. So you say one.
Okay. So my thing is this. So Jacob, of course, is upset, and Laban says, we don't do this here. We marry the older one first. And he tells him, so you'll have the week of the wedding with Leah, and then you can marry Rachel. So he knew all along that this was going to happen, because the original deal, he made Jacob work for 7 years. Now, all of a sudden, he's getting them both married off within a week, and his hands are clear.
Yeah, but he gets Jacob to commit for another 7 years.
Gets Jacob to work for another 7 years.
He does.
I just wanted to say that the only thing I wanted to add was that the Bible's favorite storytelling technique of midah keneged midah, karmic payback, is Jacob deceives his father with a clothing trick so that the younger supplants the older brother, and Lavan trips Jacob with a clothing trick. And he says, well, it's not done here to put the younger, it's not done bimakomenu. Maybe you guys do this sleazy stuff back in Canaan, but here in Padan Aram, we don't do that. The olders take precedence over the younger. So Jacob just gets smacked, and of course he's going to get tricked on later once again when a clothing trick happens with Joseph and the coat of many colors, and so and Joseph is tricked with the Mrs. Potiphar and his clothing. So there's just a wonderful richness of storytelling that is about deception and clothing all throughout these stories.
Right. Well, we're in.
This is why Jews went into the shmata business.
This is why. And we talked about Muttel Kamzoel the tailor.
Also
the shmata business.
Very nice. Very nice. Well, we have to bring this to our conclusion, and we want to thank our many people who are watching and listening to us. We really appreciate the time that you spend. We're enjoying it. We hope that we can give people a kind of diversion during some very challenging times for Klal Yisrael, for Medinat Yisrael, for our brothers and sisters, and we hope that Torah gives that comfort. It certainly does for us, gives us a little ray of light, a little piece of joy in a difficult time. And we hope you have a beautiful Shabbat, and a beautiful Thanksgiving if you're going to see this before Thanksgiving. And we look forward to seeing you again on a future edition of Parasha Talk. Have a good Thanksgiving and a beautiful Shabbat. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.